In today's video, I thought I would chat about buying yarn online versus in person in the yarn shop. There's been a little bit of controversy about this in the UK in the last week or so before I filmed this. I'm filming this in June, but the video probably won't be out till July. And I thought I'd chat about it. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you're new here, my name is Anniken. I design knitting patterns, I teach knitting workshops online and in person, and I sell yarn through my website YarnAddict.co.uk. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. So I'm a little bit reluctant to mention this, but a magazine recently, and it's a magazine I've been doing a collaboration with. By the time this video is out on YouTube, the collaboration will be over. But it made it a bit awkward to promote them because I really disagree with what they said. So a magazine recently, I'm not going to name the magazine. If you've seen it on social media, you'll know who it is, but I'm not going to name them just because I don't want there to be like a witch hunt or negative view towards that magazine, because I think they made a mistake and I think they realised they made a mistake. I've seen posts on social media that seem to try and rectify it. So be interested to see when their next issue comes out, to see if there's anything in there about it. And they do promote a lot of yarn shops in their magazines. They have done for the whole time I've been reading their magazine and contributing to their magazine, which is nearly 20 years. So recently a magazine, in their like advice column, so they have these pages where readers can write in for advice, and a member of, I don't know whether it's a member of staff or whether it's a freelancer, gave advice about shopping for yarn. The person writing in said something along the lines of that they didn't have any yarn shops locally and it was difficult to buy yarn because you can't always see the colours accurately or feel the texture or the softness of the yarn and that kind of thing accurately when you shop online. And I appreciate that's a problem. We probably all bought yarn online or clothes or anything else online, and when it arrives it's not quite the colour or the texture or the feel that we thought it would be. So that is a problem. And she was asking what should I do because my nearest yarn shop is quite a long drive away. And the advice was something along the lines, well, if you can manage to make a day trip of it, you know, make a special trip to a yarn shop that you can get to and have a look at the yarn, the colours, feel free, take pictures, make a note of what you like, and then later on you can order it online. Clearly, this went down like a lead balloon with yarn shop owners, which I quite understand. Most small businesses in the UK, and I'm sure in many other countries as well, are really struggling at the moment, especially yarn shops. And I know they're struggling because I know a lot of yarn shop owners, and I know a lot of them are really struggling. I also know that a lot of online yarn shops are struggling. I mean, smaller ones, not the big giant ones. Although their sales may be down as well, but smaller ones are struggling. I know a lot of indie dyers are saying that their sales are really low, and a lot of independent designers like me are saying their sales are low. And my sales definitely have been lower this year than previous years. And the last few years have been really bad, and it does seem to be a downward trend at the moment, I think. So I do quite understand why yarn shop owners got really annoyed. This is not a new problem that yarn shops have. I remember having somebody in one of my workshops many years ago. We were probably talking about 10 years ago, and she was saying that she'd had people come into her yarn shop, touch the yarn, feel the yarn, look at the colours, decide what they wanted, and then gone on their phone while still in her shops and ordered it from big online retailers. I think she was specifically mentioning Love Crafts, but Amazon sell a lot of yarn. I must admit, I have occasionally ordered from Love Crafts if I couldn't find it anywhere else and there was something I needed for a specific thing. But I don't go onto Love Crafts just to browse for yarn to order, just because I fancy buying some yarn. It's only if I've had to order something specific, and it tends to be if it's like a bigger yarn company that I can't get locally, and it's just been quicker and easier. I don't know if I've ever bought yarn on Amazon. I always get surprised when people tell me they buy yarn on Amazon. I guess I tend to forget that Amazon sell yarn and craft related things. I have occasionally ordered other craft supplies on Amazon, but mainly if I needed it really quickly. Like when I was reviewing the C-knit needles last winter, I ordered them on Amazon because I was struggling to find a retailer that sold them. I'd been asked what I thought about these needles, and I wanted to film a review, and I needed to film a certain number of videos before I went to Norway in, I guess it was February. So I think I just ordered them on Amazon because it was quicker and I could get them within a couple of days. And I think it was just a convenience thing, which is, to be fair, most of what I order on Amazon is because I can't get it locally, and it's just easy and quick, and I can usually get free delivery to my local Amazon locker. But I don't, as a whole, order a lot of craft stuff and yarn stuff on Amazon. And whenever people have something, so for example, in my workshop, somebody has some knitting gadget or yarn or something that I'm like, oh, that's nice, or that's useful, where do you get that from? And when they say Amazon, I'm like, oh, don't fancy Amazon. Same thing when I hear people say they bought stuff on Temu or Temu. I taught a workshop last week, and this lady had really nice stitch markers that looked like the coconut stitch markers that I have, that I use. And I said, oh, they're nice. And she said, yeah, I got them on Temu. And I was like, okay, but I'm not buying anything on Temu, not just for that reason, that I think they rip off a lot of independent creators, but also I have read that the people behind Temu have gotten in trouble in the past for mining information off people's phones, so I just don't trust them as a business, and I don't understand how things can be that cheap. So I haven't bought anything from them, and I've got no intention of buying anything from them. If that's the only place you can afford to shop, I'm not going to judge you, but I personally have chosen not to buy anything from them. But I don't want to go into like just complaining about cheap places to shop, but we do need to think about the fact that all these cheap sites that are selling stuff cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, it is a race to the bottom. So about 10 years ago, or nearly 10 years ago, I guess 9.5 years ago, I was talking to a yarn company owner. It was a small yarn company that had their yarn produced in South America. They were telling me they were stopping selling wholesale to yarn shops because they couldn't compete with the likes of Lovecrafts. And they said that they had been approached by, I think it was Lovecrafts, might have been one of the other big retailers, about stocking their yarn, but they wanted it at such a low price that yarn shops wouldn't be able to compete with them, and they didn't think that was fair. So they took the decision to stop selling to yarn shops, and the way they took this decision was very sudden, and I know that a lot of yarn shop owners were very upset by it, because I had several yarn shop owners tell me how upset they were by this, and they decided to sell the yarn directly themselves through their website, which I think they're already doing, but they like halved the price. I think they had massive discounts and to try and sell more yarn. They were also doing a lot of pre-orders. Unfortunately, I think their financial situation was quite precarious at the time, and they were desperately trying to rescue their business, because they did go into receivership less than 6 months later than that. And when they went into receivership, they also ended up owing me money because I had been teaching for them. I'm not going to say which company this is, because this is 9 years ago, so it doesn't really matter. But I know there was a lot of upset at the time, but the owner did tell me that the reason they decided to stop selling through yarn shops and sell direct and discount their yarn so much was because that was the only way they could survive. But they didn't survive. They went bust within 6 months. So I don't know whether cutting prices and is necessarily sustainable. It's just a race to the bottom, isn't it? So I'm sure most of us, if we are able to go into yarn shops, and I appreciate that you may not have a yarn shop locally to you, but if you're able to get to one, you will appreciate that it is different shopping in a yarn shop. You can ask for advice, you can feel the yarn, you can ask for advice on patterns, and if you have problems with your patterns, you can go back into the yarn shop and ask them for help. And most yarn shops are happy to help you with patterns that you have purchased in the shop, or at least if you purchased a yarn in the shop. Because some yarn shops now don't sell patterns. They might sell you patterns through Ravelry in-store program, where you can look up patterns on their computer, and they will kind of purchase it on your behalf and maybe even print it off for you, or email it to you and you have to print it yourself. That's quite common, but I don't think as many retailers now keep loads of pattern books and folders worth of patterns in their store, because I think most people probably go online and buy patterns. But if you go into a yarn shop because you're having problems with a pattern, you may have bought a pattern online and you may have also bought the yarn online or from a different store. Then you go into the shop and you expect them to help you with a pattern and yarn that you did not purchase there. I know a lot of yarn shop owners get really upset about that. And I guess depending on how good a customer you are, they might feel obliged to help because you're a regular customer, and they might be happy to help if you're a regular customer and you buy most of your yarn from them. But if you regularly go into a yarn shop to attend their knit and natter groups or knit and stitch groups or whatever, crochet groups, whatever they are, or their social events, or to ask them for help, and you don't regularly buy stuff from them, I quite understand why yarn shop owners get upset. I've seen yarn shop owners say you're only allowed to attend their knit and natter, knit and crochet groups, whatever they're called, if you knit with yarn you bought from them. I'm always a little bit uncomfortable by that because it kind of discourages some people from attending. But I can also understand it, because if you turn up with yarn that you bought somewhere else, especially if it's a nearby or online discount place, other people say, "Oh, Anniken, what are you knitting today? Where do you get the yarn from?" And then you end up talking about other yarn shops and competing businesses. And I have sat in yarn shops for workshops and for knitting groups, and people have been saying, "Oh yeah, you can get this at such and such a store just down the road, it's half price compared to here." "Oh yeah, you should buy this, you can get it so much cheaper online." And I feel really uncomfortable by that. I also don't like it if I'm teaching, if people say, "Where else do you teach, Anniken?" Or "I see you teaching in such and such a place." If it's somewhere far away, like say if I'm teaching in Devon and somebody says, "Oh yeah, I see you teaching at Black Sheep Wools in Warrington," that's not such a problem, because they probably aren't going to attract the same people. Because if I teach in Devon, people who live in Devon probably come to my Devon workshops. If I teach in Warrington, which is in the north of England, then that's probably going to attract people who live in the north of England. So I don't think that's such a problem. But I have had periods where I've taught in yarn shops in neighbouring towns, and I try to not encourage any talking about it. If somebody have asked me where I teach, I'll quite often say, just look at my website, or I've quietly told them at the lunch break or at the end of the class, because I feel a bit uncomfortable about it. When I'm in a yarn shop, I want to promote that yarn shop. But I do appreciate that not all of us have a yarn shop locally, or we may not have a yarn shop that stock the yarn we're looking for. So there are times when we want to buy online, or we need to buy online to get the yarn we want, and I do appreciate that. But obviously we then have the problem with, can we see the yarn? Do we know what the colours really look like? Are we going to be disappointed? So what I would suggest is, if that's a problem, is if you go to a yarn show, don't go into your local yarn shop and photograph the yarn and touch the yarn and feel it and then look online for where you can get it cheaper. I don't recommend that. I obviously appreciate if you're on a tight budget and that's the only way you can afford it. It's difficult, but it's probably better to make a note of what you'd like and see if the yarn shop that's nearest to you have some kind of loyalty program where you can save up and get discounts, or wait till they have a sale. Most yarn shops will have yearly sales at least, or sales a few times a year. I think it's better to do it that way than to immediately try and find it cheaper online, because that yarn shop is not going to be there next time you want to pop in for something. I think going to a yarn show to do yarn research is probably better. So you can go to a yarn show, look at yarns. I think it's perfectly acceptable at yarn shows to ask a storeholder, can I take a picture of that so I don't forget? Obviously, it depends on what kind of stall they are. If they're an indie dyer, then you're not going to be able to get that yarn anywhere else unless they sell retail through yarn shops, because it's their yarn. And I wouldn't go take a picture of one indie dyer's yarn and go to another indie dyer and say, can you dye this colorway for me? I think that's a little bit sketchy as well. I think going to a yarn show and doing research, taking photos of the yarns you like and the colors you like, making a note of which colors, which brands and things you like. The brands that I sell are not exclusive to me. They can be purchased in loads of yarn shops, and there's quite often other people at shows selling the same yarns that I'm selling. And that's fine because I know they're not exclusive to me. But I would still be upset if somebody came and looked at my store and said, well, I like this yarn, but so-and-so around the corner is selling it for 50p less. I mean, if that's the case, fine. Go and buy it from them. But don't tell me or announce it on my stall in front of my other customers. If you see that I sell something and somebody else at the same show is selling it cheaper and you prefer to buy from them, fine, go ahead. I mean, obviously, I'd rather you bought it from me, but if you've seen it somewhere else, that's fine. But don't announce that in front of me and in front of my other customers, because I just think that's a bit rude. So I think don't go into a yarn shop, look at yarn, and then what's still in the shop, Google it and order it somewhere else on your phone. Do check if your local yarn shop or your favorite online independent yarn shop have sales or loyalty cards or something like that, so you can save money if you buy a certain amount over a year. Maybe you get a discount, things like that. A lot of yarn shops will offer you a discount on yarn purchases if you attend a workshop. So if you're attending a workshop at a yarn shop, see if they offer that. I know a lot of the places I've taught over the years do offer a discount to people attending workshops. Now, some people only offer that discount on the day. Other people will say it's valid for a week or 2 weeks or a month afterwards. So if you're not sure if they offer it, you could always ask when you book. And then if you know you're going to want something, or there's something you've been saving up for, if they're giving you 10%, 15% off yarn on the day of the workshop, then maybe try and see if you can save up for that so you can purchase it when you're there for a workshop, because you're going to save some money if you buy it then. Do you want to support our local yarn shops, because they are a great resource? We can get lots of pretty yarn there, obviously, and it's a way of seeing yarn in person, touching it, feeling it, chatting to other people, chatting to the owner of the staff about different project ideas, getting help with your projects if you get stuck. And I do think that's important, but I wouldn't go into a yarn shop and ask for help for a project that I hadn't purchased the yarn or the pattern there. I think that's a little bit rude, to be honest. I know one yarn shop, I don't know if she still does this, but I know she used to. If people came in with a question that would take more than a couple of minutes to answer, she would make them book in for a one-to-one session. I think she did them in slots of like 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how long you needed. And then she would be able to sit down with you and help you with your project. Because the problem is, a lot of yarn shops, especially in the UK, are tiny, and they usually quite often have one member of staff on duty at a time. So if you come in and you want help with a project, and quite often that takes a bit of time, depending on what it is. If it's a pattern specific help, you have to, the person helping you has to sit down, look through the pattern, get their head around what the pattern's saying, and then try and explain it to you. And maybe it needs there are mistakes that need fixing and stuff like that. And these things take time. And if there are other customers in the store, then the person is torn between helping you, helping other customers. If you have to wait, you'll get annoyed. If other customers have to wait, they'll get annoyed. So this particular shop owner started booking these slots for people so that she could do that when she had another member of staff in the shop, so that she wasn't leaving other customers waiting or leaving the person who wanted help waiting. And also, if you're asking for something that takes more than a couple of minutes to answer, you should probably be paying for the expertise of that person, in my opinion. If you go to a yarn shop that has knitting groups or knitting crochet groups, stitching groups, whatever you want to call them, then don't boast about yarn purchase elsewhere. I mean, if I went to a knitting group and I had bought some yarn in Norway and I was knitting with it, somebody might say, oh, what's that yarn? And I could say, well, it's a Norwegian yarn. I got it when I was on holiday. I think that's okay, but saying, oh, I got this just down the road at that cheap yarn shop or at that budget shop, or what happens in one yarn shop I was at in a knitting group. It was in Devon, and there is a big shop in Devon called Traeger Mills near Newton Abbot. If you've been on holiday in that part of Devon, you're probably familiar with it. And there was a person saying, oh, you can get that cheaper at Traeger. And Traeger Mills was like 5 minutes drive from the shop. So I thought that was quite rude and unnecessary. And this person, I don't think ever saw her knit with any yarn from that yarn shop, but she was at the knitting group every single week. She never came to their workshops. That's not true. She did eventually come to one of my workshops, but that was after quite a few years. I don't think I ever saw a nip at any yarn from that yarn shop. I've also seen people complain about yarn shops charging for knit and natter sessions and knit and crochet sessions, that kind of thing. And if they are giving you space in your shop and they're providing you with tea and coffee and biscuits, I don't think it's a problem charging you a few quid for it. Especially because some yarn shops will actually make you book for that kind of social session now, because they get too many otherwise. They haven't got room, and they don't necessarily want 20 people sitting around in their shop knitting and crocheting and chatting and drinking their tea and coffee and eating their biscuits and then leaving without buying anything. So I know some shops will now charge for that, just charge a few quid to cover the cost of you being in their store. They probably have to get an extra member of staff in to help make teas and coffees and that kind of thing. Yes, there's always a chance that when you're there, you're going to buy something. Hopefully it will, hosting groups like that will foster loyalty and you'll become more loyal to that shop. You'll get to know the staff better and you will be tempted and buy stuff while you're there. And it does create a sense of community. But there are also an awful lot of people who go to these groups, especially if they're free, and just sit there and drink the tea and coffee, eat the biscuits, and never purchase anything. So I quite understand now that a lot of shops charge for it, because they just have to be able to survive. They are giving you their space and their refreshments for you to have a lovely social time with your knitting friends. So I think charging for it is absolutely fine. So let me know what your advice would be. Do you have yarn shops near you? Do you struggle to get a yarn shop? Is your only option to buy online? What do you do about seeing the right colours and textures and softness of yarns and that kind of thing? Is that a problem? Do you quite often end up buying yarn that didn't look the way you expected it to look? I think that we need to support the yarn shops while we have them. I see a big difference between yarn shops here and in Norway. If you're regular, you know I go to Norway a lot. 5 times last year, 3 times already this year, and I'm probably going to be in Norway when this video goes live. And I'm going again probably in the autumn and at Christmas. It'll be 6 times this year, I think. So I do go to Norway a lot. In Norway, there is a yarn shop in almost every town. Last time I was in Norway, I found 2 yarn shops I didn't know about in 2 towns that I've been to loads of times, but I didn't realise that there were yarn shops there. So in Norway, there are so many yarn shops and a lot of knitters compared to the population. I think there's a high percentage of knitters in Norway. I think in the UK that's not the case. There's a lot of people here, but fewer people knit. And I think yarn shops here really, really struggle at the moment. So if you want to keep your yarn shops and keep that expertise and be able to pop in for your knitting groups or to ask advice or to buy yarn there, please support them, because they need your support to stay alive. Small online businesses like me, like a lot of indie dyers, also need your support. So if you can support independent businesses, whether online or in person, that's much better than supporting the big multinational retailers like Amazon, like Lovecrafts, like Temu, whatever you want to call them. So tell me in the comments what your views are on this topic. What's your advice if you can't get the local yarn shop? What are your personal do's and don'ts in a yarn shop? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.